Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conservatish, episode 184. My name is Peter Feliciano. Find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano. Actually, find me on Conservatish at Instagram because they're closing my old account because liberals know what's best for all of us. And you can support this podcast at patreon.com/conservatish. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. Ladies and gentlemen, our wonderful, wonderful guest today is Sery Kim. Yay! Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
No,
Yes.
yeah. So please let us know what you are and what you're running for. Please talk about you.
So my name is Sery Kim. You can find me at seryfortexas.com. I am running in this wild, literally wild jungle primary in Texas. It is Tarrant, Ellis, and Navarro County, Texas 6. The special election is Saturday, May 1. So I guess that's 2.5 weeks from now. And there's a lot of us. Like I said, there's 23 of us, but I am conservative, Christian. Your viewers, if they look at me, I'm Asian. I would be, if I am elected on May 1st, I would be the first ever Asian congressperson in the South, which I think is a really remarkable thing.
The first Asian congresswoman in the South?
Yes.
Wow. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. Well, awesome. Yeah, I looked at a bunch of your stuff. It really, you have a great resume, especially for someone like I'm 34. I've done very little with my life, but you worked very hard for a long time. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the idea of identity politics and how. So, like, I'm a half Puerto Rican. So I don't usually lead with the identity politics, but I am happy to meet somebody who's mad about my show or mad about my opinions with that. I'm happy to jump in the muck with them, if I need to. There seems to be a lot of, it doesn't happen often, but there does seem to be a lot of white liberals who want to tell me what's best for me, or who want to white-splain to me that I'm oppressed. When in actuality, especially my experience with Asians, I've had a lot of support just from coming out as non-liberal with my show. Almost every single Asian I've come across, whether they be Filipino or Chinese or wherever, they don't like the liberal stuff either. They don't like the victimhood stance either. Y'all are like, I was FaceTiming with a friend of mine, I think he's Vietnamese, and he was like, "Hey, check this out." And he's got this giant AR-15 on his bed. I'm like, "Oh, wow, very interesting." So from your experience, you grew up in Seoul, and when did you move to Texas?
So I immigrated here when I was 2 from South Korea. My parents came over here legally. And, for me, this entire experience running for Congress and also just being Asian, growing up in Texas, I had a great childhood because we were wealthy. In fact, it was the exact opposite. My parents were here in Arlington, Texas. They cleaned toilets, they emptied trash cans, the invisible working poor that the liberal media elites always patronize by saying, we know best for you, right? We want to raise your taxes so that we'll free stuff from government. Well, that's this country. My parents came here to live this American dream. And I think the reason why the Asian community, the reason why the Hispanic community, the reason why the Black community here, and we really stand together is that we don't need a handout. We just want government to get out of our lives. And I think that's why the mentality, and there's a lot of camaraderie between our two communities, is that for the most part, we do keep our heads down. We work really hard. We just want our children and our family members and our friends to be able to live up to their potential. It's so patronizing for like Nancy Pelosi and AOC to look at the color of my skin as if that is the sum and substance of who I am as a person and say, "Oh, you're Asian. You must need free things." I mean, yeah, that to me is so offensive, right? Like, "Oh, you're Asian, so you're poor, you're misaligned, you've been taken advantage of." And I think to myself, no one ever sat next to me while I was studying and said, "Oh yeah, it's hard for you, so study less because ultimately we'll give you free college tuition and, definitely don't work 20-hour days, because you know what? We'll ultimately give you, thousands of dollars of free money from China. This is not the American dream. The American dream is work hard, live up to your potential, and for goodness sakes, government, get out of the way.
Right. Amen. And there's and on an individual basis, that's the thing that I mean, I have a lot of liberal fans and followers. The ones that I know, on the most part, or for the most part, are actually quite reasonable people. When you
Mhm.
get them off of social media, if they're on
Yeah, right.
social media, that's when it's like, I have a feeling that's really important. Everyone, listen to me. Um, says the guy who started his own show so he could rant. But they're pretty reasonable. But the thing is that they don't. We don't focus, I think, the non-liberal side of people. I don't think we focus on the individual as much as we focus on the individual capitalism and rock and roll and personal responsibility. But the individual personality of a lot of these people, we don't focus on, and a lot of these people don't understand. A lot of the liberals or the leftists or whatever you want to call it don't understand the spiritual benefit of earning your shit. They don't understand the spiritual benefit of pulling yourself up. I know it sounds like a dog whistle, but we're two people of color. We're not dog whistling, okay? But pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and the spiritual benefit of earning your way is something that cannot be replaced. It cannot be given. That's something that you do all by yourself. And I earned this for myself, for my family, for my kids. And that's something that you cannot transfer. You cannot give that to somebody,
The most beautiful thing about the American resilience. Even if you get knocked down, even if you fail, you are able to pick yourself up and still succeed and still live the American dream. I mean, 99% of the businesses are micro businesses. They're not quote unquote small businesses. They are like a husband and a wife team having a dry cleaners, a wife who opened a store while her kids go to school, but they are able to buy a home. They're able to send their kids through college. This is the ultimate American experience. Not everybody grows up. Most of us, we do enough to live an extraordinary, ordinary life. I mean, the fact that I came from poverty is an extraordinary thing. I mean, some people might think being a member of Congress is like a demotion. Like, why would you suffer through that? Why would you go to the cesspool that is the swamp? I
Right.
mean, look at you. You have your own show. And so I think for most of us, people see, the fact that we're, on a podcast, or they see that we're running for office, and they think, oh, you guys are really successful. But it's the everyday experience of earning your paycheck, living a great life in your community, of raising a family. That's what makes America special. Is that you don't have to be born into privilege or born into a good situation. You can go from nothing to something just because the opportunity.
Right. And it's not just patronizing what the left is doing, especially I've noticed, I think from their perspective, thank God someone white did something bad to Asians recently, so we can say stop Asian hate. When in reality, it's not just patronizing what they do, but now they're trying to dangle this victimhood narrative in front of you, and they're doing it without even properly diagnosing the problem. The majority of the attacks against the Asian community have been black men. Like, let's be real. I have lots of black friends. I don't want to justify it for you, everybody, but the reality, let's call things like they are. And I personally, I wouldn't even say that the majority of the attacks on elderly Asians are from a place of racism. I don't even think it's a place of hate. I think it's especially in Chinatown in Oakland. It's the elderly Asians. They don't have guns. They don't have ways to protect themselves, and they're more vulnerable. They're in a more vulnerable place. And so to run up on an elderly Asian man I've watched the videos at the ATM and just steal the money he just took out is easier than somebody who's 6'1" and 240 and is has this mean mustache. Like there's but the way that the liberals are just completely blind to that is adds insult to injury, quite literally. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you're being injured, you're being attacked, you're being in record numbers, But now we're not even going to call it like it is. Now we're going to say it's white racism. Nonsense. They literally are saying it's because Trump called it the Chinese virus. It's like, do you think that the black men in Chinatown and Oakland are Trump supporters? What is wrong with you? Come on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's just a complete absence of common sense and connecting facts. Like the three things that I always tell people about the current situation is, first and foremost, it's not like discrimination and hate is a novel thing just because CNN started reporting about it. I mean, let's be real. One of the most famous actors in the world, Mark Wahlberg, in 30 years ago, he committed multiple acts of hate against Vietnamese people. But in 2016, when he was seeking a pardon and a punging of that, he never acknowledged that he had any hatred against Asian people. And so just because CNN is talking about it now, it doesn't mean that there are people from a place of privilege or people from a place of hate or people from a place of ignorance that have been or have not been doing this to Asian people in the past, And so just because the liberal woke elite want to make another news narrative that helps them sell newspapers and clicks and all this stuff, I mean, that's just not the reality. And the second, I mean, you brought up the China flu, the China virus. The actual origins of COVID-19 were in China. The CDC said it came out of Wuhan. The CDC under Obama and Biden are acknowledging that they gave $15 million to Wuhan lab to create a biological weapon. I mean, these are facts. So if you label the scientific origin of a flu from the scientific location that it is geotagged to, doesn't make you anti-Chinese. It makes you a GR. I mean, that's where it was. And then, the third, this whole like Asian hate thing, like Asians are disadvantaged. Asian people have always been considered white adjacent. People look at us and they assume we're doctors, we're lawyers, and I am a lawyer, so I get that. But my parents were janitors, they were nobodies. And so if you look at Asian people and you're like, oh, they're privileged, oh, they're great, then you ignore the suffering of a lot of people that work really hard, that are invisible to society. And so that in and of itself is a perverse stereotype.
Right, definitely. And I mean, one of the things I love about doing just like this type of conversation and doing that and having this type of conversation in this long form way is that context is something that it's automatic. It's subconscious. We all get it. We all get it. When somebody makes a joke, even if it's not that funny, we know that they were going for one. When somebody makes, especially I can be pretty loose and all over the place with my words, but I have no hate in my heart, except for maybe for white liberals. But what bothers me is that people have been trying to get you in trouble and get you backlash for some of your comments, when in reality, you're just calling it like it is. I've actually been to China. I went there for a week a couple of years ago. And individually, beautiful people, wonderful people. They're spit indoors or whatever. But other than that, like in general, incredibly kind and generous people and whatever, even though I didn't speak any of the language. But from a government place, they do not care about human beings at all. And culturally, that does trickle down into the individual. You look at the Muslim camps over there. Is it Uyghur?
Uyghurs, yeah,
okay,
and
yeah.
Shenzhen, yeah.
Right, and what they're doing China has always, for a long, long time, has been not great with human rights. But apparently, you're not allowed to say that because they're not white. You know what I mean? Like you can only talk crap about England or maybe Norway, like you can only talk about like America, but or same thing with Mexico. They talk about you put it beautifully. You said that when Biden is saying, well, Mexicans are trying to escape persecution and a bad experience. It's like Mexico is the 13th largest economy in the world.
13th largest economy in. This is what's insane from the liars that are a part of the a liberal media. I mean, you brought this up. If you Google Sery China, you find all sorts of stories. I mean, there was a standalone story in People magazine, and I was on the cover of Drudge Report for 2 days. We're talking about the Chinese Communist Party. Washington Post is so out of control. A white reporter said that Texas's 6 would be racist to elect an Asian woman, and instead, to be anti-racist, you should vote for a white guy. I mean, this is the logic. This is the logic of the Washington Post, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, thank you. And then they were like, Sari's definitely going to win, so you should just not vote for her, you know, because that would make you a racist. For what I said, says the white guy, you know? This is, and so we cannot have a policy-based conversation about anything anymore if you are a conservative. You're not allowed to discuss science, facts, business, heritage, geography, nothing if you are a conservative, because the First Amendment only protects Democrats. They only allow you to speak your truth. But if Sery Kim says something, you're racist. If you say something, you're racist. If your viewers have any opinion about the Chinese Communist Party, the Uyghurs, China's one-child policy, where they killed 35 million girls, what they're doing to the continent of Africa, what they're doing to literally countries around the world with $1 billion roads and bridges program, with the stealing of intellectual. We closed the Chinese consulate here in Houston, Texas, because they were legitimately spying on Americans. If you talk about any of these facts, you're racist against Asian people, even if you're Asian. It's wild. It's wild.
This is something that if you don't believe in the principle when it isn't convenient to you, you do not actually believe in the principle. Principles before personalities. There's been people who I dislike greatly, and I've been like, all right, I'll suspend, I'll wait to hear the story before I react emotionally. It's a hard thing to do, because I want to say you're on their side and I'm on this side, and if you're on my side, then you and do that childish activity. But the reality is that if you don't believe in the principle of, say, that perfect example, free speech, for speech that makes you boil with antagonism, then you don't actually believe in free speech.
That's right.
And the willful what I was trying to say regarding context is that it's willfully disregarding context. They get context. Comedy club is a perfect example. Comedy club does not lie. In the crowd, when you're sitting in a comedy club, even though if you read on paper, hey, audience member who's all by themselves and on social media, would you agree with or would you allow a race joke, or would you allow a this joke, or a really a Holocaust joke or a rape joke, some horrible stuff? Would you laugh at that? And of course they would say no. But if you're in an audience and everybody's riding this weird energy wave, and you understand that the person on stage is just going for a joke, they're not it's not a blanket statement of what they believe, they're in a comedy club, they get the context. Everybody subconsciously, even if on paper you would say, I would be offended by this, we're all riding this wave, and you can't disprove it because everybody laughed. You can't disprove it because we all understood what just happened. He made us think or made us laugh or whatever, and we all rode with it because we get it. We understand context. I trust my audience to know that if I make a race joke or if I say a word, that it's in the context of a conversation, and it's okay to question things, and it's okay to talk and piece things apart, and it's gonna get messy. And the thing about liberals is they really believe that they are the intellectual elite. That's why anytime anybody has to, I was watching, oh God, if anybody wants to mess up their emotional place in the day, just look up the word BIPOC and start listening to these insufferable liberal women go, explain the word BIPOC to you. And it's always from a place of like, well, I shouldn't even have to explain it to you, but I guess I'll deign to bring myself down. And they're never fun and they're never funny. Liberals are lame. They're squares. They're not good. They're just boring. They're intellectually boring. And yet we all have to, like you and me, and we all have to go, no, child, please, no, 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 Dakota, we're not gonna buy you the toy. You know, why do we have to play that game, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, the perfect example of that is if you watch like one of the TV things like you did. I mean, if you Google Sery Kim Mueller report, I actually read the Mueller report 19 times. And I was a part of like the all day Fox News coverage. And I read it 19 times because if you are AOC or Ilhan Omar or any member of the squad, you can manufacture a fact. And the presumption is it's accurate, right? Because you're liberal, you're socialist, you're smarter than us, right? But if you are conservative, you legitimately have to say the page number and the footnote of the fact to say you're not right. And I think of that in the context of Adam Schiff in the 3 years that he just lied. He put Trump's first 3 years under a shadow that there with Russia, that in fact did the election time after time after time. He went on television and said, this is true. But then you read the Mueller report, it's not there. It's not there at all, right? And so this is the battle with the conservatives. This is the battle for the future of this country, is that you should have a First Amendment right to be stupid, right? Which is, I mean, if you want to say crazy things that, you know, even as an elected member of Congress, even as the ranking member of Intel, you know, AOC has 12 million Twitter followers. You can be a total airhead if you want to, AOC, but the First Amendment defends my right to be factually accurate without being a racist.
Right. And I do also just, I know we're going to start wrapping up here in a second, and thank you again for taking the time with me today. But one of the things I noticed is that the people at the top, the Bidens, the AOCs, some of those it is coming. I think, well, maybe AOC is not a good example. I think she's an airhead, like you said. But it's all from a place of emotion, right? It's all from a place of emotion. I feel something, so it must be true. And then the people at the top who are kind of leaning things and also disregarding context are doing it, I don't even think from a place of malevolence, but they do know what they're doing. So there's a difference between the people who know what they're doing and the people who are just being liberally or, you know, emotionally led. And the backlash from what you were talking about is a perfect example, because there are some people who are like, I read it and I didn't even read the article, but I saw that Sery Kim says something racist. So now I can't be on her side. I can't vote for her. I gotta, even though I don't live in Texas, I gotta get on Twitter and explain and express myself. But then there are the people in Congress who pull their support and say, well, I don't stand. And I think that those people know context, they understand it, but they also want to get the PR off of them. They don't, so they understand what you were saying. They understand, but they're not being led around by their emotions, but they all also, it's more that swamp stuff that Trump was saying, where it's like, if you've been there for a while, you want to keep your job. Your whole job is to keep your job. And so they want to get the bad PR off of them and say, no, I don't stand. And I would never, you know.
Yeah. And for me, I am so fortunate that I got to go to a great law school, and I'm an attorney, and you know, have spent all this time working for so when the media comes after me and the Washington Post says I'm racist, or you know, CNN says I'm a racist, one of the first things that I did was I filed a $10 million defamation lawsuit. I mean, if you're saying that my conversation about the Chinese Communist Party is equivalent to being a racist, but I send you the hideous and horrible, and I have hundreds of death threats against me, to the point where, you know, I had to call the FBI and report it because they kept telling me they know where I live and they're going to come kill me. And the things that they say about me is considered just backlash. These people need to go inside a courtroom. And I want the Texas Tribune to say, in a court of law, what is racism and what is backlash? What media company actually would want to do that? And for me, that fight is worth it. And this is why it's so important for people in Tarrant, Ellis, and Navarro County. I'm not willing to stand by and let the liberal media win. You know, it's my life forever. They say the First Amendment and free speech allows us to call you whatever it is that we want because you're a public figure. I am a first-time candidate. I've been running for office for like 5 weeks,
Mm.
and for the rest of my life, if you Google my name, racist comes up. That to me is wrong. That to me is the quintessential defamation lawsuit. It's just, and I encourage your viewers to like go to Sery for Texas, and hopefully they'll support and donate to my campaign. And we're gonna need good people to stand in this arena and say no more.
Amen. Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate it. We'll wrap up. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time with me. Enjoy the enjoy the defamation lawsuit. Go get them. And yeah, any last words? Just everybody should go to Sery for Texas.
Yes, SeryForTexas.com, and the is one. So tell all your friends who live to please come vote. There's only 33,000 people that we're asking to come vote in a district where normally 400,000 people do. Every vote counts. Every vote will matter.
All right. As long as they count them the right way. Hey. But yeah, I'll go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you so much. And here we go.